Indie Bohemians, Indie Bohemians, Indie Bohemians, morning.
This is Paulina Combow from the Indie Bohemians Morning Show, and I talked to Tyler Floyd and Jason Gray. They're both veterans of the American Armed Forces and the subjects of the documentary That Which I Love Destroys Me, which tackles the subject of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. You can see the film at the Belcourt this Wednesday, March 25th at 7 p.m. Go to takepart.com for more info. But now, here's Tyler Floyd and Jason Gray.
You know, you make something, it's like, I mean, not that we're artists, but you know what I mean? It's like an artist paints a picture, and it's not really necessarily what they think about it, it's what other people think about it. And that's kind of how we feel about the documentary is, you know, we put ourselves out there, but it's really, you know, what's somebody else taking from it, and does it, and can it help them and help them help others?
All right, exactly. Okay, so the film is called That Which I Love Destroys Me. It's a documentary. It features Jayson Floyd and Tyler Gray. And so, I mean, when did you guys start this project, and how long did it take?
Started the project in, Jason helped me this when it was 2009?
2009. From concept till now, it's been about 5.5, almost 6 years. We filmed for over 3.5 years, and we filmed hundreds of hours of footage. They edited it down to 65 minutes. Yeah,
I saw that it's just a little over an hour.
Yeah, and that, I mean, it's just interesting, you know, as being subjects of the film, and like Jason said, having been on film for that amount of time, and I mean, there's weeks and months of filming that aren't even on screen. There's so much out there, and then to see the final product is it's just a documentary, you know, which actually kind of leads back into your question of how did this process start. We started it without, you know, if you were making a fictional movie, you have a script, you know the beginning, you know the middle, and you know the end, and within those confines, you also know every single word that the characters are going to say, what they're going to do. You know everything. You know their arc. It's already laid out, and has a plan and a progression. With That Which I Love Destroys Me, all we had was an intent. And the intent was to help people, and to achieve that, Jason and I's plan was we were just going to be as honest and as raw and forthcoming as we could when we were on camera, and tell everything without any filter on whatsoever, and just put it out there. And so we really didn't know exactly, you know, where that was going to lead over the course of, like Jason said, almost 6 years.
Wow. So are you saying that you guys had an intent? So the intent is to really inform people about PTSD and how serious it is, and, you know, how it's caused and how it affects your daily life. But do you think that by the end of filming that you guys came up with something different?
Go ahead.
We clearly didn't know where this was going, and the film process in general for Tyler and I was therapeutic. We actually didn't think it was going to be therapeutic. When we sat down, we thought potentially this could be done in 3 months, the initial part of it, and we're going to keep moving forward with it. But what we learned is that this documentary had a life of its own, and you know, there was years of gap. There's like a 1.5 year gap. We filmed a little bit. Another year gap, filmed a little bit. And what we started learning is that you started seeing our progression. You started seeing how we learned how to cope and deal with PTSD, how we learned how to communicate with each other through that process. And what you're seeing on film is what it means to deal with PTSD and what PTSD looks like, which is better than the initial idea of saying what we thought it was and telling you what PTSD is.
Yeah, you're also, to dovetail off that, you're also seeing, with what Jason was saying, you're seeing us as the film progresses. You got to also keep in mind, generally, and I haven't actually figured this out exactly, but I'd say, Jason, over 90%, I mean, almost the entire movie is filmed in chronological progression. I think there's maybe a couple times it's very, very slightly out of order for different reasons, but by and large, it's filmed chronologically. So over the course of the entire film, you're not just seeing our progression, from everything else, just a time component, but you're also seeing it kind of us absorbing in hindsight, the past, learning from the past, not just our personal lessons, but even from things. It would be like a therapist doing enough therapy sessions that they start changing their therapy from learning how their subjects react to their different techniques and practices. If that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's
like we're seeing ourselves as, it's like we're over the progression, we're our own, we're helping each other, yet we're also seeing ourselves help ourselves and how that helps each other. And it's this kind of a synergy that developed over time, which is also why the change on screen is so apparent. It's because of that synergy.
Right. And then you guys have breakthroughs on screen?
Well, there was moments where, like we said, we didn't know we had an intent of a message, and that's what I think Rick's main goal was. What is this message? How do I capture this message? So we had an intent. But we were also put in scenarios where we didn't know the outcome of that scene. We didn't know the outcome of the event that was being documented. So you see, if you want to call it a breakthrough, you see new discoveries, you see sudden realizations, you see emotional reconnection happening. They happen in real time.
You are unquestionably watching therapy. There's no doubt about that. There's no let there be no mistake about that. You are watching therapy, and if you kind of take it in the analogy of your radio show and how you are as an interview, and you put yourself in the director's chair as Rick, it's kind of like, he would say we would never know where something was going to go. Sometimes he wouldn't tell us what the questions were at all. We'd just sit down and he'd ask us something. Other times he would come up with a question, and then beforehand he'd go, does this make sense? And we'd kind of look at it and go, yeah, it does, but it would make more sense if you asked it this way, because then I can talk about this. You know what I mean? So we weren't framing anything, but again, if there wasn't that relation, it can never be, just like an interview on your side, you're always going to have a better interview and a better final product if you have some feedback between you as the interviewer and the interviewee, to where you guys are on the same level of what, you both understand what your end state is and where you're coming from.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of the reason, because I was reading about, your film and stuff, and you guys are special operations soldiers, so obviously the military is a big part of your life. But I didn't want to make the interview all about military, because it seemed like the film also touches on how you can, people suffer from PTSD from all kinds of situations, not just from military tours. Am I on the right page?
Well, yeah, that's for lack of a better term, that's a whole another can of worms.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you're right. And the way I explain it, or the term that I seem to keep using is, that's correct. You can have PTSD. PTSD is not, in no way specific to, the military or combat or anything specific related to the military. It is a very broad term to describe a psychological or a physiological reaction or set of reactions. You can have PTSD from a car accident, from being abused as a child. A million different things can give you PTSD. So when we talk about PTSD, when the VA talks about it, when the military talks about it, or when it's used in a veteran context, especially a combat veteran context, the problem is that you're using a very, very, very broad term to describe a very, very specific problem.
Yes.
And the reason, I believe, and Jason and I have talked about this, that so many veterans fight the PTSD label is because of that kind of mislabeling of the term, is they don't have exactly what, the DSM, says PTSD is. They go, well, that's not exactly me, so I don't have that. They know they have a problem, but they go, it's not PTSD because I don't have those specific issues. So what Jayson and I were trying to do, and I think, if I had one large overarching goal for this entire documentary, it's to show that PTSD is a vastly more complex, and it's a term that is, it's a rough term, but we need to accept that it is an umbrella term that means a very wide array of problems relating to situations that can occur, again, whether it's military service or not, but specifically, obviously that's the context we're talking about. But you have to accept that just because you don't fit that exact same label doesn't mean the label doesn't fit.
Right. Cool. Yeah. Okay. So I don't want to oversimplify this, but it keeps coming into my mind. Do you guys watch The Walking Dead on AMC?
Yeah, I've seen the first few seasons. I love that show.
Okay. So right now where they're at on the show, I don't want to give it away, but they're...
Yes, please. I'm not there, so don't...
Yeah,
no spoilers.
I don't want to give spoilers. But yeah, they are... I think the writers, they've incorporated it because some of the characters, they've been out there, in the wild and kind of in nature. And right now they're kind of in a safe environment, but some of the characters are suffering from PTSD, and they're not coming out and saying that, but they're showing it. And I think they're doing actually a really good job of showing it because everybody around them is saying, like, it's okay, you're safe now, but they're just, like, they're kind of having flashbacks and they're having these feelings like, you're not worried about the right things. And I don't know. I just think they're just doing a really good job of illustrating that.
The one thing I really liked about that television show is that it shows that competitive, polarizing effect inside of your brain between the animal and the human during the processes of the first few seasons, where most civilians don't understand the animal of survival at that level. And then you see these civilians turn into that animal, and then you see the struggles between that human and animal fighting inside of them. And then you see how it can consume some people, how the PTSD affects some people. And I think it was a pretty fair portrayal of the seasons that I've seen.
And the irony, again, I haven't made it past the first season yet, but with, yes, there's monster spoilers coming my way, I'm sure. But to use your analogy of what you just said, where they're at again, I haven't seen it, but from what you're saying, that sounds very much like something that we talk about in the film, which was a term we came up with, that we made up, but we call it, people don't suffer, military special operations don't suffer from PTSD, they suffer from LTSD, lack of traumatic stress syndrome. And to use, from what you just told me about the show, where they're at, it would be the example of somebody coming to the character and going, look, we're fine, we're safe, everything's good, and them freaking out. And what they're experiencing isn't post-traumatic stress, it's they are experiencing a lack of it. What basically happened is you took them from the beginning of the show, they're these normal, well-adjusted human beings. Then over the course of the show, you've had them fight and do all this crazy stuff and turn them into these hardcore animals. They're now different people. The animal within them was let out of the cage, and now they're in a quote-unquote safe environment, and everyone around them's going, dude, put the animal back in the cage. You don't need it anymore. And those people are going, I can't. It doesn't work that way.
They're also saying that animal is the only thing that kept me alive during that time. And when your life comes down to survival and you benefit an attribute of yourself to your survival, you never want to give that part of yourself up, because if it happens again, you don't want to lose that. Because the strongest thriving, strongest urge in any living organism, in any human, is survival. So once you know it comes down to life or death, and you know that that's what saved you, you don't ever want to ignore that part of yourself again. You don't want to let go of that part of yourself again. And society is asking you to do that.
Yeah. Right. That makes sense to me. Yeah.
It's the only thing, think about it, those people's hyper-awareness, them, constantly worrying about different things, that's what kept them alive, again, using the Walking Dead as an analogy, but, that's what kept them alive through the show, and now somebody's telling them to shut that off. And they're going, no, I can't. I need this. And that, dovetailing back into the documentary and what we're talking about, that is a part of what PTSD is. It's society telling veterans, hey, you don't need this anymore, shut it off. And the veteran going, you don't understand, I can't. I needed it for so long, I don't know what to do without it.
Not even
I don't know what to do without it.
Not even I don't know who I am without it. Your brain literally won't let you. You can try telling me that I need to do this. Your brain goes into survival mode. It's locked in that for a while, if not forever. You can develop that human side again if you again as well to balance that. You'll never lose that.
Right. No, I mean, I can't personally identify with it, but it makes so much sense what you guys are saying. You know what I mean? Because I think that the way that PTSD has been portrayed a lot of ways is that, you know, there's a loud sound and then a veteran freaks out because they think a bomb's exploding, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, at the very basis of it, that's a sensory trigger. It goes through a primal part of your brain before it reaches the rational part of your brain. And once that primal part, the animal part's activated, you can't recondition the wiring. You can just learn how to rationally circumvent it by understanding you might be in scenarios or places that trigger you, by understanding that you have a new neurochemistry pattern that wasn't there before. So your rational brain has to learn how to balance out that animal. That trigger is never going to go away.
Right.
But to use what you just said, the interesting part about that is that is the cliched, societal portrayal of veterans. A loud noise, and they jump on an imaginary grenade. I mean, this is kind of, I grew up in the 80s. This is like Vietnam, stereotypical Vietnam vet kind of PTSD concepts, right? And the thing is it's cliched and it's stereotypical, but like Jayson just said, it really is true. And it's true because people understand that that's like the cliche, but they don't understand the why.
Yes.
And the why is very simply exactly what Jayson said. It's you hear a loud noise and it circumvents all your rational and logical wiring and just goes, protect yourself.
Or protect the people around you, because we're also packing.
Or protect the people around you. Because if you didn't, if you think about it, if in a combat zone you hear a loud explosion and your first reaction is, I wonder if that was an explosion or somebody just dropped a pallet on the ground, whatever, then you're dead or people around you are dead. So you get conditioned to, as soon the millisecond it happens, you are conditioned, drop on the ground or jump on top of somebody or something. That conditioning, that's why over time it circumvents it it just becomes an automatic reaction. And now a loud noise elicits that automatic reaction. And the point that we're trying to make, too, a very big point that we're trying to make with the film, which is something that you just said, which is you said, well, I have no personal experience with that. The thing is you actually do. You just don't realize it. And here's what I mean by that. Have you ever been in a car accident?
Not really, not a serious one.
Okay. Have
it's a
you
fender bender, maybe. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Have you ever almost been in a serious car accident? Like screeching brakes?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So the first time you heard screeching brakes behind you, in front of you, what did you immediately do? You 10-step waiting for that crunch, right?
Right.
Now imagine that instead of it not happening, it had, and the screeching brakes led to a big slam. Now think about how you would react if you ever heard screeching brakes again.
Right.
Again, what we're trying to show with this film is all PTSD, LTSD, all these terms that we're throwing out there, all it is a normal, natural human reaction to a given set of experiences and circumstances.
Right.
To abnormal set of experiences. It's a normal reaction to a abnormal circumstance, because the abnormality of it is it hardly ever happens, so you're not conditioned to it already.
Yes. Well, one thing I wanted to get your all's opinion on, and maybe you've already talked about this or made a statement, but
American Sniper.
Yeah, well, not just that, not just the movie. I mean, everybody has an opinion on the movie, but then the verdict recently, the person who killed Chris Kyle,
Yes.
they're not gonna, how do I word this? They want to put him in prison.
They're not. I'll say it. They're not allowing him to use PTSD as a defense. Is that kind of where you're going with it? Yeah. Or I'm sorry. Go ahead. What's the question from that? I guess.
Well, what's your opinion on that? And is that something that you? I mean, I guess my thing is, so there's a jury of civilians apparently who are sentencing this guy and saying, no, you don't have PTSD. And I mean, obviously he did kill somebody, but you know, the question is, should he spend life in a mental hospital or prison?
Well, I mean, my take on this is pretty simple. When you come back from a collapsed society, ideally what we're talking about here, primarily what we're talking about here is a war zone. It's the complete opposite of a constructive, well-formed, and balanced
peaceful
society. Yeah, peaceful society. Part of that peaceful society is based off of the government and the judicial system. And that is
as well as the police force and the enforcement of laws.
And the enforcement of law. So that process is how we correct, balance, and mitigate all of the different variables that come with breaking those laws. And when we could give so many opinions, but at the end of the day, what we have to say is you just have to trust the judicial system, because that's the defining body or defining entity that handles it. So whether or not I want to argue if this is right or wrong, whether I want to argue one way or the other, ultimately what you have to say is I have to put my complete faith in this balanced society, in our judicial system, to do what is right. And so I personally am not going to say whether or not he should or shouldn't, because to be honest with you, I don't know the complete details at all. So when we've been just given a platform to have a voice that can create influence, I think the worst thing you can do is give ill-informed advice. And that's why I pump the brakes on that and pull it back a little bit. And, you know, he was in front of a jury of his peers, and they're the ones that dictated it based off the guidelines of our governmental system. So that's the outcome that should be played out. You know, at the end of the day, no matter what, when you come back, if you're having problems that start to get you in trouble with the judicial system, if you have problems where you start to get arrested, if you have problems where our society in whole is held responsible to that, okay? So that is the standard that you have to learn as your individual lesson when you come back. You have to learn to live with those boundaries. If you don't, our judicial system is what's supposed to correct that. So the thing that me and Tyler are happy about with this documentary is associated with Justice for Vets, where around the nation right now they are indoctrinating courts and the veterans courts that give a certain leeway to these.
Instead of leeway, replace the term understanding.
Right.
It gives a certain understanding of the mental health effects, the substance abuse effects, the rage, domestic violence, isolation, depression, all of those variables. It validates that a veteran might be suffering from something that happened to his war-related injuries in favor of this country, and then when he comes back, he or she comes back, he should have a rational understanding. And so that's why me and Tyler support these Justice for Vets courts, because someone that is dealing with substance abuse, those are the symptoms, and they're not dealing with the cause. And usually the judicial system deals with the symptoms and they punish. So what they're focused on, what me and Tyler believe, is that you focus on the cause of the problem. That's what these veteran courts are doing. And it gives them a second chance, and it's also saving our judicial system hundreds of millions of dollars, potentially billions and billions of dollars, by taking this approach.
Yes, by taking, people that have, that probably wouldn't have ended up in the legal system had it not been for their service. It's giving the judicial system another tool in how to deal with these individuals, rather than the previous restrictions that they've had. So
not based off of punishment. The current structure is based off of punishment. This is based off of behavioral changes based off
treatment, rehabilitation, awareness. And you can also, any of the listeners that we're actually, there's a petition on the takepart.com /vets website. There's a petition to sign to get these veterans courts, justice for veterans courts developed around the country. It's a cause that we have supported with the documentary. And let me add one last thing to what Jayson just said about the, about that trial. And as Jayson said, I don't know enough about it to really comment on whether I think he should have been allowed the PTSD, quote unquote defense or not. But I will say this, and that is, regardless of PTSD, he could have level 10 PTSD. Regardless of that, and if there's one thing that the military does, it's that it builds a team, but it builds a team upon a foundation of, to be a good member of a team, you have to be a strong individual, and you have to be individually responsible for yourself. And by being responsible for yourself, you can contribute to the team. And regardless if this person had PTSD or not, he is still responsible for his actions. Just like anyone in society is still responsible for their actions, regardless.
And then the one thing that defines that, Tyler, in my opinion, we've had this conversation before, is that we're a democracy, so our rules are in place by a majority vote and by the people we elected to make these decisions. There's no other way to do this process, to have a justice system, unless that's effective, unless it's ran the way we do. There's always going to be issues that come up where stuff needs to be changed, and that's what we're proud to be associated with TakePart.com and Participant Media, because they have a social action change that drives, if not all, most of, if not all of their projects. So, the intent is, it's a tough lesson for a lot of these veterans when they come back, and that's why they have problems with these courts. That's why they might, if you're having problems with your nervous, so you have to isolate yourself. All of those things are you're isolating yourself to protect other people and yourself. And you're going to have to, at some point, humble yourself and say there might be something going on inside of yourself that you don't know, and how can I learn to bridge that gap to live a healthy and happy life again in a conformative society?
Yeah, that all mental disorders, it seems like a big part of that is accepting it and the stigma against it.
Well, yes, it's acceptance, and what we're kind of saying with the documentary and what we're trying to do is we're Jayson and I are by no even remote means, the worst case scenario or had it the worst or the most experienced, not even close. All we did was put our stories out there with the hope and intent of sharing ours to get other people to share theirs. Because once you start to talk about yourself, then you can realize, what, maybe I do have an issue. This is an issue I see on screen with them. God, I actually do have that too, and I never really thought about it like that before.
Something to add to that is there is a natural cleansing process that your body goes through when you come back, and it's called avocation. This talking through your problems. You have emotions for a reason, so even if you're not talking through it, if you have emotions that are affecting you deeply, your mind and your body are trying to tell you that you're dealing with something that you need to recognize. So that it's not admitting a weakness. It's just listening to your body, trying to correct the situation.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. That's awesome, guys. Thank you so much. You're so well-spoken. I can't wait to see this documentary. So it's going to be at the Belcourt Theater here in Nashville, March 25th. That's a Wednesday. At 6, there's a pre-screening. At 7, they show the film. And a little after 8, there's going to be a discussion. So are you guys going to be there for that?
We're working on our itineraries right now. Yeah, it's we're coordinating travel.
Awesome.
But there will be a Q&A.
It's a big crunch to get it all in, but yeah, we're definitely working on it.
Well, awesome. That sounds so great. And if somebody's not able to come to one of your screenings, I think you're doing 10 cities as part of this tour. So how can they watch it if they can't come to a screening?
Right now it's streaming for free on TakePart/vets. So you can go there on TakePart/vets and just watch it for free all month of March. It's primarily just to get it out there, and it's a grassroots movement to get to increase the awareness and to break down the stigma and to normalize the process.
Awesome.
TakePart.com/vets. It's free for the entire month of March. In addition to that, it has been and will continue to be on iTunes. If somebody doesn't catch it during March, it's on iTunes. That Which I Love Destroys Me. You can look it up on there. And then also look at TakePart.com/vets for the different cities if it's in your area.